right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Tim. Today, I have the pleasure of having Shane Chapman with me. He's one of the owners at Ultimate Deck Shop. I think you evolve into Ultimate Deck, right? Because you used to be a different name when I met you. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when I met you, I was working on my own business called Fresh Decks or Fresh
Ah, that's right.
Construction at the time as a contractor, and so now we've kind of not only changed names but changed models. So this is a completely new business on the retail side of the contracting game.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. I see you guys doing so many things out there. I see a lot of your ads. I see a lot of people commenting about the services that they've gotten from your company. So when I saw the opportunity to have a conversation with you today, I took it. So I'm very excited to have you on the podcast today to talk about entrepreneurship. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about your journey, about how you got to where you are today.
Oh boy, I feel like it depends on how far back you want to go. I feel like my journey to getting to where we are today was a lot of years in the works. I think you hear sometimes from people when people think they're an overnight success, and I'm not calling myself that. I just mean when people talk about people who suddenly become known for something, you think it happens overnight, but in reality, it took a lot of years before that. I feel like my story is similar. Yes, I launched a business 5 years ago that's doing well, but I feel like there was 10 or 15 years before that I thought about it. Right? There was a lot of years of thinking and dwindling and like trying things and whatever before I finally settled on something that I was willing to commit my life to. So
That makes sense.
I don't know how far back in the journey you want to go, but we started this business. I guess we're going into our sixth season. So about 5 years ago, a friend that I've been friends with for quite some time, who's in contracting as well, decided that we were going to open up this retail store. So that started about 5 years ago. Prior to that, like we mentioned earlier, I was building decks, but more as a kind of weekend gig, a passion project, I guess. But it built a fairly good reputation, just kind of evening and weekends type work through Fresh Decks. But even before that, I was always dabbling in something. So it wasn't always decks, but it was something, right? It might have been like web design or online communities around the Rough Riders, or like I always had something on the go to kind of keep my brain, kind of keep the creative side of my brain moving. So it
Makes
was
sense.
always kind of built in me. I just wasn't exactly sure what the thing was going to be that I was going to focus on.
Well, that makes sense. You mentioned one thing about how people look at things and they think overnight success, but they don't understand kind of the background of it. What it reminds me of is it's kind of like a tree. You see the tree, you see the top of it, but the roots of it inside the ground is much larger, right? And that just kind of
100%.
goes into the process that goes into building your company. People only see what is above ground, but they don't see the amount of work that's in the background that went into creating a type of thing. Did you have really any challenges or any fears from going from even like say working for the government and kind of just doing a weekend gig of building decks to starting this company? Because I mean the company being a wholesale or selling materials to people and to companies, it's definitely capital heavy, right? So were
Yes.
there fears and stuff like that you faced or challenges that you faced along the way?
Yeah, of course. I love your analogy, actually, the whole tree and the root system thing. And I guess maybe to roll back my story before and to expand on that analogy, I feel like I sat as the seed
Yeah.
for the tree for a long time and never had the right things going into it to actually cause that to grow. So if we want to expand on that analogy, there was a lot of years as a seedling being like, I need to, but what is it? How do I get there? How do I grow?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but yeah, of course so prior to this, to doing this, my full-time job was in marketing at Sastel. So I had a good job. I had a job that paid well. I had a job that had all the benefits you could ask for, the pension, the security. Like if I wanted to spend the next 40 years of my life working in a secure job, I had that lined up already.
Okay.
Um, I could feel confident that I was using my education that I'd spent money on when I was at SaskTel, so it didn't feel like that was wasted either. So I guess for a lot of people, maybe I had it made. Like there's a lot of people that I know at SaskTel that are still there and they'll be there forever because that's what they're looking for, is that stability and assurance, and they're going to be there forever as long as they want. But that, while it was nice, like it's nice to get that steady paycheck and it's nice to know you're kind of taken care of, it wasn't what I felt I was meant to do. So I'd been thinking for a long time about leaving SaskTel and going and doing my own thing. And so at some point years ago, I found this passion for building decks.
Okay.
And probably for, I don't know, I'd say 3 or 4 years at least before I quit to do the Ultimate Deck Shop, I thought about quitting to do fresh decks full time.
Okay.
And so every winter I would get in my mind and start going again and being like, okay, well, this is the year. All I have to do is kind of line up some jobs, get my ducks in a row. Like I've got all the tools, I've got the truck. All I have to do is quit and commit to it.
Yeah.
And every spring I would find myself like, I would find an excuse to not. And I don't know, like it was obviously fear just kind of getting in the way of my desire, but I think it was always easy to fall back because I had that safety net. If I didn't quit, I'd still make my $65,000, $70,000 a year, and I'd still have my pension. I still have, like nothing changed if I didn't quit.
That's right.
My life was still comfortable. But if I did quit, well, there's some risk associated with that. I know I can work through the winter, no problem. What am I going to do? Or sorry, through the summer, no problem. But what am I going to do in the winter when people aren't building decks? Do I want to be renovating bathrooms and that kind of stuff? And I didn't really. So I always found a convenient excuse to not take the leap. And it wasn't until we came up with the idea of switching to the retail side of things that I really found the confidence to accept the risk and actually make the leap. And so I think part of that came from, it was just a different model of what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And I also had a partner in this too. So Wade and I discussed the idea together. And I think that kind of kept my feet in the fire a little bit, because I knew that no longer could I just be like, it's okay, I'll just fall back onto my old job, because if I did that, I'd be screwing over a friend too, because we both committed to doing this, right?
That's right.
So we had a bit of accountability there, but it was scary. Obviously, friends and family and those that care about you the most are like, they think about the risk and stuff for you as well, and maybe more so than you do, because they're looking out for your best interests. They don't see the idea in your head. They don't see what you're trying to do. They only see the risk that you're leaving.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I heard a lot like, what about your pension? And honestly, it got to the point where I was like, I don't care about my pension. It's not about the pension. If I cared that much about the pension, I wouldn't leave. Yeah. But that's not my driving force, is the pension. It's not.
Yeah. And
so, yeah, it took a bit of a deep breath and to actually make the jump. But I haven't regretted it not for a second.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You someone have a family and kids. How was that conversation? How did you say to your spouse, hey, I'm going to quit my job that is secure and we're going to do this? How did that conversation go?
Yeah, I mean, I don't recall there ever being like a sit down moment about it, to be honest. She's always been incredibly supportive. So at no point was she ever going to step in the way of my dreams. But I think she'd also seen my growth when I was building decks, that I was capable of being successful at something that I was in control of. Yeah. Because I know when I was building decks, like it started out as just a hobby, helping friends and family, and it turned into like a side gig, a side hustle. And then I think when I talked to her about like, I want to do this, I want to do that, she would see that I would actually go and do it. Like things would work out. So I think there's some solace in it for her to say like, yeah, it's a big risk, but I trust that he's going to figure it out. And so I don't remember there ever being a conversation where we sat down. The only thing that happened was we knew at that time we were living in a small condo, and we knew that we were wanting to buy a house. And we also knew that if I quit my job, that would not happen. Right. So one of the things we made sure we did first was buy the house while I was still employed, and then figure that out later too, right? You're like, we'll worry about the mortgage payment later, but let's get the house before we can't. So she was always incredibly supportive. She obviously took a lot of risk with me. Mm-hmm. And since then we've had more kids, but we're 5 years, just about 6 years in, and we're still going. So I hope that I've made her proud and eased her mind as well.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, the one thing I know about her is that she's always been supportive of you. Because I remember when my wife and I hired you to build my deck, she would be there bringing you food, helping you, and your son's there too. So I
Yeah,
mean, that's definitely one thing I know is that you have a very supportive family. And that's the thing with entrepreneurship, right? Or going into business, that support that you
yeah,
have of your family and friends, that really is a great thing. It's a driving force. But like you said, the one thing that could truly take your dreams away is fear.
100%.
And if you let that fear take over, then your dream doesn't become a reality. And in your situation, you started with one store in the city. Now you've expanded. Can you tell us a little bit about the expansion?
Yeah, so it's gosh, it feels like we've expanded more than that because we like our Regina location has also grown a lot throughout the years. So when we first opened, we picked a pretty conservative spot to lease because we had no idea if this was going to work or not. Like when it, we thought it would, but we really didn't know what to expect. You can only plan so much. So we went with a fairly conservative location to make sure that we weren't kind of overcommitted from an overhead perspective to try to make this work. So we moved into a really small building, small yard, just to try to get it off the ground. And we outgrew that spot right away. So after the second season, we moved to another location on Dudney Avenue, which was, the building itself was twice as big and the yard was 5 times as big or 6 times as big as what we had. And we thought, well, this is great. This will be more than enough space and, that we can kind of stay here for a while. And then within a year, we knew we outgrew that one too. So we were moving 2 years again. So we're entering year 6 and this is our third location in Regina. And now we've gotten into a place where I actually do believe that we can be here for a while. Like it's a huge yard, very big building.
That's good.
So I feel comfortable here. But last year we also made the decision to expand into Saskatoon, which was always the plan. Right from day one, we knew we wanted to be more than one store. It took longer than we thought. Like when you're naive and starting something, you think you can kind of take over the world in a short amount of time, but then you find out that we had some decisions to make along the way too. When we moved from one location to another in Regina, we weighed the pros and cons of, do we move the Regina location and expand it, or do we open Saskatoon now?
Okay.
And the thought was, we're a long ways away from capitalizing on all the opportunity within this market. So let's just keep building this until we feel comfortable with where we're at here,
Okay.
and then and then expand.
Okay.
And so we made the decision in the fall of 2019 to open Saskatoon. We kind of thought like, now's the time, we've been doing this for 4 years. If we don't do this, we thought that we had done a good enough job and captured enough attention in the industry that other people saw what we were doing. And we thought that it was maybe only a matter of time before somebody tried to replicate that.
Okay.
And so we thought we need to move to Saskatoon before somebody else decides, before 2 more guys that have been buddies for 20 years decide they're going to open up a tech shop, right?
That's right.
And so we made the decision to do the Saskatoon thing. We kind of thought, we have to do this just like we did the first one. We just have to decide we're going to do it and then take the first step.
Yeah.
Like it's not ever going to feel like the perfect time. So let's just commit to it and go. So we did that. We started shopping for a building. We found a building, committed ourselves to it. And then we were not looking to move in Regina again at that time, but the perfect building came available. And I know my business partner, Wade, came back to the store one day. He's like, we're moving in Regina. And I said, we're not moving in Regina. He's like, no, we are moving. And I was like, no, we're not. We're opening Saskatoon. We're not moving Regina and opening Saskatoon in the same season. And at that time, it was still just him and I and one other guy that were full-time all year.
Yeah.
So you're now talking about like 3 dudes that are going to open a brand new store in a new market and move. So I thought it was crazy, but he's like, jump in the truck. I'll show you the building that I found. And we went for a drive and he drove into the yard of this building that we're in now. And like, you can see where this went. I was like, yep, yeah, we're moving. So last winter we moved locations and opened a new one as well.
Well, that's great. That's a great story to hear. Last year came with a lot of uncertainty for a lot of businesses with COVID and everything like that. How has your business sustained? From what I heard, the construction industry everything like that just blew up. Like everybody was building decks and renovating and stuff like that. How has the pandemic really affected you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the pandemic was probably when it first hit was probably the first real dose of um, me really questioning things.
Okay.
So, when I quit my job and we did this full time, we were kind of like, we put the blinders on and we just went full steam ahead. And, it's only really been positive news since we did this. We've grown every year. It's just working for us. There hasn't been a lot of adversity along the way. Sure, there's been road bumps that pop up, but we always figured it out. I would say that last March was probably the first time that I was like, had an oh shit moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that in your podcast, but
fine.
it was the first time that I sat back and was like, I don't know if we'll make it out the other side of this. I don't know. Because the thing I love about being an entrepreneur is you're in control of everything you do. That's what I love about it. That's what I hated about working in a corporate gig, was that if you wanted to do something and had to go through 15 layers of red tape and be approved by 16 people and then back again, and it took forever to do anything. And that drove me nuts. I like that in my own thing, I can make a decision today and make it happen tomorrow like that. So I like the feeling of being in control of things, but for the first time, I felt completely helpless when that pandemic hit. It was like, what do we do? There's nothing we can do to influence the world right now. And so there was for sure a scary moment back in March when when it really hit us, I think, was we had a really large order of decking that we have area rights on. Yeah. And we had another lumberyard in Calgary that had placed a large order with us. And the weekend that Calgary got shut down, they called that Monday morning and they canceled that order. And for us to lose that kind of revenue in March, when, a typical March for us is not busy, the sun's not out yet, people aren't doing decks yet, to have that phone call and have them cancel that, not only did that be like, holy crap, we just lost a boatload of revenue off that one job, but also if this lumberyard is canceling their material because of what's about to come, should we be canceling our material? Because we also commit to a lot of inventory over the winter to get prepared for the season, and all of our orders were in. And around March is when they're about to show up. And so, you got $1 million of inventory coming, and you don't know, at that time, we didn't know if the season was going to happen. That's right. Like, it was looking like nothing would happen that year. Everybody's going to be losing their jobs, locked up at home, no money to spend on anything. It's like, if this doesn't happen, we're sitting in all this inventory, like, we'll go bankrupt.
That's right.
So that phone call put me into a bit of a funk for a few days. And my immediate reaction was to start calling my suppliers and being like, I don't know that we can take all this material. What's going to happen? And at that time, nobody knew, right? Like, there was not a single person in the world that could tell you how that was going to play out. But the guys we were calling were just as scared as we were, right? And they're taking a phone call from one of their customers saying, I'm canceling a couple $100,000 worth of this. And they're going like, no, don't do that. Don't cancel it. So thankfully we had some support from within the industry to say, like, don't cancel the material. We don't know how this is going to play out. Like, this will probably blow over in a month or two. Yeah. And things will get back to normal. Just, take the material. If it doesn't happen, we'll figure it out, kind of thing. Right. Okay. And so we put some faith into the people that we were buying material from, that they would actually, we would figure something out as far as how to pay them or get the material back or whatever, if the season didn't happen. And so I would say that I spent a pretty solid 3 days waking up every morning on my phone, checking to see what the COVID numbers were that day. What's happening in the world? What's happening? And all that did was put me into this, I started every day in a negative headspace and started my day with fear every day, being like, crap, it's only getting worse. It's only getting worse. And about day 3 or 4, I just made the conscious decision to stop doing that. Wake up, get up, put yourself in a good mindset and go to work and make it happen. And so I snapped out of the funk. And then I think and during my funk, Wade was all like, rah, no, let's go, let's do it. And once I got out of my funk, he went into his. Oh, no. So we kind of balanced each other a little bit. So we had a week there that was pretty there were some moments down here for about a week where one of us was not feeling super hot about things. Yeah. And then we started to get into our heads a little bit about, yes, the numbers are bad right now. We're not selling anything, because we were getting into April. We were trying to open a new store, still wasn't open yet. We had staffed up early this year to get ready for having a new store open, us not being around this one as much. So we had put in some general manager positions we never had before. We hired some estimators we never had before. Our payroll and our overhead was going to be a lot higher this year than it was in the past. And yet the revenue in the start of April was way down from last year. And so we were in pure panic mode. But at some point we both kind of thought, like, you know what, the weather's really crappy right now too. Like compared to last April, the weather is junk right now. It was still snowing halfway into April.
That's right.
And so we started to wrap our head around, like, yes, the pandemic is probably scaring some people to a certain extent, but maybe this is more weather related. Maybe this is because it's just crappy out and nobody wants to be building decks yet. So we kind of like both stepped back, held our breath a little bit, and we're like, you know what? We think that when the sun comes out, this will still happen. And thankfully, third week of April, the sun came out and it did happen. Like the sales started to come in, and then we were able to kind of sit back and breathe a sigh of relief. And then, as you said, in the construction industry, things actually kind of took off a bit. Mm-hmm. So we went from probably the scariest 2 months that we've ever had, having to have conversations with these people we just hired and say, like, heads up, if this season doesn't start, like, not good for any of us.
Yeah, no, that's true.
But thankfully, it never came to that. The season started, and we ended up, salvaging a season. And Regina actually ended up a little bit ahead of where it was in 2019. The new store was impacted, I think, by the fact that we lost the home shows, which is a very
that's true.
Big source of leads for us. And so we had planned to be in both home shows in Saskatoon. They both got canceled just like a week before they were supposed to happen, 2 weeks before they were supposed to happen. So we lost that opportunity to get our name out there in Saskatoon. So, we didn't do as well in Saskatoon as we wanted to in the first year, but it was still promising, all things considered.
I think it's so important to look at that story and kind of just see the perseverance in it, the way that you and your partner balanced each other out, and the positive mindset. Because I think it's missing a lot of times when you're running your own business and you're hit with the pandemic. People start to freak out, and when you're freaking out, you can't really think clearly to kind of forge a path forward, right?
100%.
Because the thing about running your own business is that you always have to be strategic in your thinking. And if you're thinking based on fear, or if you're not thinking clearly, your strategies might be flawed, and you might not be as strategic as you can be. So I know a little bit of luck, a little bit of hard work, a little bit of everything, and it all panned out this year. How is the Saskatoon store doing now that you're about a year into it now? You're coming up in almost a year into it.
Yep.
Have you been able to get your name out there as much as you would? What are the other strategies that you've implemented to get your name out, since some of the traditional sources, which is the home show, are not available right now?
Yeah, so I'll get to that in a second, but just to roll back to what you said about like fear affecting your strategic decisions. I mentioned last year that fear almost had me canceling my material at the start of the year. If I would have done that, if I would have followed through on that fear and actually canceled material, we would have been in a world of hurt last year. And what ended up happening, and this was a risk that played out in our favor by sheer luck maybe, but what ended up happening is I kept all the material, but not all my competitors did. And so what ended up happening is we had this boom in the construction industry where all of a sudden lumber became short supplied, everything became short supplied.
That's right.
You had trouble finding anything. And so here we are, and then the price increases started to show up around June, July, August, September. There was almost monthly price increases on lumber in those months. Well, what we had done was ended up keeping all that material we booked earlier in the year, which means we bought it at a lower cost. And a lot of our competitors did not. So as we started to get into the midpoint of season, when guys started to run out of their initial purchases, people couldn't find lumber anywhere, but we had it. And so it ended up bringing, like, we had some contractors that probably ended up with us last year that we would not have had there not have been a shortage at the competitors where they typically shopped. And had we canceled our material, we wouldn't have been able to capitalize on it. So in the end, that decision to stick with the material probably brought us more business in the end, brought us more contractors because we were competitively positioned very well versus some of the other guys in the industry. So as far as how Saskatoon is doing this year so far, we have a target as what we want Saskatoon to do this year, and it's aggressive. And I think so far with the number of quotes I'm seeing coming in, we're we're probably on target with that.
That's good.
The nice thing about this year is that we know we don't have the home shows, and so we can plan to put that money elsewhere, and we can plan to do things without them.
That's true.
Last year we had committed to those home shows. We had paid for the home shows. We were building the booths. Like we were already building them. We were committing time and resources to doing it because they got canceled so late. So this year we know we don't have to worry about those things because those would be happening right now, normally, right? End of March.
Yeah.
So we know we don't have to do that. We know we don't have to put budget towards it. We know we don't have to staff them. So I'm able to put some money into other things, whether it's, we're looking at some different options right now, but we're able to spend our money a little bit better. What I wasn't prepared for was for spring to start happening at the end of February. So even on a normal year, our season doesn't usually get underway until like sometimes April's a hit, sometimes it's not, depends on the weather. May's usually your first like real month when things start to happen.
Okay.
Like March so far has been crazy. It's so busy already. So I don't have any of my my media stuff happening yet. I wasn't planning to start that stuff until April, but already things are happening. So I'm seeing a lot of positivity coming out of Saskatoon and the number of quotes coming through. I would say it's lagging a little bit behind on people on converting those leads from where Regina is right now. But I do believe that sometimes that is, as much as people may not think about this, there's for sure a weather difference between Regina and Saskatoon as far as when spring hits and when fall hits. Saskatoon does seem to lag behind in the spring a little bit by about a week or two. And then fall seems to come a little bit earlier too, just being that they're, 300 kilometers to the north of us. So I see the stuff coming in. I think Saskatoon's about to start converting those through, but it's lagging behind Regina a little bit. I'm very optimistic that what we're seeing for activity coming through Saskatoon is where we want it to be this year, though. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
That's good. I just want to say one thing real quick. You just heard it though. If you want better weather, you got to live in Regina. So Regina is.
Yeah. Certainly not the case all the time, but it does because we obviously have daily communication with our Saskatoon store, and we're up there a lot too, and it usually is a couple degrees warmer in Regina on any given day, and we do find that seasonally things kind of start a little bit later and end a little bit earlier as far as summer goes. So it's no different than Moose Jaw. Not to crap on Regina's parade, but Moose Jaw is usually a couple degrees warmer than Regina too, right? So
that is true. In all seriousness, though, what I find with a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners like yourself is that the ones that give back in the communities tend to be the ones that are most successful. It's just, it's that law of attraction. You give, you receive type of thing. And I've been seeing you give your time to teach the up and coming youth in high schools and places like that about entrepreneurship. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So like I said, I thought about doing my own business. I think I remember having a road trip with some friends in high school. I think we were just I grew up outside of Regina, but I think we were driving to Regina one time to come to the Globe Theater or something. I can't even remember what it was, but I remember having this conversation with friends as early as 17 or 18 years old about starting a business. And at that time, way back then, it was I think it was web hosting or something, right? The internet was booming. We were talking about doing a web host or something. We were talking about buying computers to do all this stuff. So I remember as early as, the end of high school, wanting to do my own thing. And then I turned 40 in 4 days, and we started this business, in 2016. So it took me from, I graduated high school in 1999. It took me 17 or 18 years to finally see through with that. Yeah. I dabbled in it. I always had something on the side, but for me to actually commit a career to it took me a long time. And, if I have a regret, it's that I didn't take the leap sooner and do something sooner. Where could I be right now if I would have done this 20 years ago or 15 years ago? True. So because of that, I'm a big fan of trying to encourage other people to do it, to not sit on it for 15, 16, 17 years. Yeah. And so when we started this business and I started out on my own, I had the opportunity through a mutual friend who was a teacher at a high school in Regina to come speak about starting our own business. And I took that opportunity to go talk to a bunch of kids about doing it. And so that's become kind of an annual thing now. I usually speak to 1 or 2 high schools a year about it. had some opportunities through SciAst as well, in Moose Jaw and Regina, to just kind of go and preach that path, that career path. And so I don't expect kids in high school to know exactly what they want to do. Some do, some don't. I certainly didn't. I was still trying to figure it out for a lot of time after that. But I feel like if I can get out there and kind of, at least, because I can tell both sides a little bit. I've been in the corporate world as well. And if that works for you, I can tell you the kind of pros and cons of that. And if you want to go entrepreneurship, I now know the pros and cons of that. And so I love what I do. I love speaking to other entrepreneurs. I just love the conversation. I love people's passion for what they do. And so I love to get in front of other people, tell them a little bit about my story, and try to answer any questions or fears that they might have as high school or post-secondary students. So as much as I hope it brings value to them, it's something I enjoy a lot too. So
That's, that is great, because I mean, a lot of times when we go to school, they teach you get your degree, get a job, get your pension type of thing. So it's great to have somebody that's seen both, that's lived both worlds, the corporate world and the business world, out there teaching kids that, look, you could do this, right? I
yeah,
remember talking to my 7-year-old the other day, and it was his birthday at the beginning of the year, and I said to him, I'm like, so what's your goal for the year? Because I always tell him to make a goal for the year, and for him, it's to learn to read properly. So we started talking a little bit, and I said, hey, when you grow up, are you gonna run a business or are you going to work for somebody? And he goes, well, I'm gonna work for somebody. And I said, why? It's like, well, Dad, I see you run your own business and you're always working. So, and I don't like that. So, I mean, it kind of put things into perspective, the sacrifices that you make when
100%.
you run your own business, right? And
Yep.
obviously, I'm going to encourage him to get out there and run his own business to buy, because he's a big yacht fan. So I'm like, okay, you want to own a yacht, you gotta be the one signing that check, not someone else
Yeah.
signing your check, right? But it
Yeah.
just kind of puts it into the perspective that a lot of people don't know the sacrifices that you make as a business owner to grow your business, right? Because sometimes it is tough on your family, right? And a lot
Oh,
of people don't know that.
yeah, it still is, right?
Mhm.
Like, but it is a choice that I make. Um, so like right now, I'm still like, getting into entrepreneurship is not for somebody who wants to kick it back and relax on the weekends. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not, for the last few months, I've been working 12, 13-hour days. And
Yeah.
so I'm 5, 6 years into this thing. I'm at the point where I probably don't have to do that.
Mhm.
Like, but I also don't feel like I'm going to grow this business working 8 hours a day, working 9 to 5. Like, if I wanted a 9 to 5, I would have stuck at SaskTel. I had that, right? So I show up here now and I put, 8, 9, 10 hours in at the office, and I go home, have some family time with my wife and kids. And once they all go to bed, I'm back on the computer at night from 9:30 till 2 in the morning.
Yeah. That's
So I don't intend to do that every day for the rest of the year. But right now is when the summer hits, when spring hits in our industry, there's no more time to do any of the building things you need to do. Now it's just order taking, making things happen, and putting out fires.
Mhm.
And it'll be like that from basically now until the end of October. So
Okay.
I won't have any chance to do any of the strategic stuff we talked about before. Now is the time for that. And so I feel like I'm in a bit of a crunch time to get that stuff done before the season really hits me. And so, yeah, I've been putting in crazy amount of hours, and we're to talk about the sacrifices your family makes. That's one of them, right? My wife's up early with the kids, and I dog at getting out of bed because I was up till 3 in the morning,
Yeah.
and it's not a healthy lifestyle. But I'm only planning on doing that for a couple more weeks here, hopefully, and then I can get back to a more kind of normal 9 or 10-hour day schedule and not bring out the computer at night. But 100%, it's a lot of work. It doesn't have to be. There's plenty of business owners out there that do settle into a nice, stable work schedule, and they have good work-life balance.
Yeah.
I just firmly believe that if I want to beat the guys that I'm up against, I need to work more than they do. And so if they're working 8 to 5, every hour I put in after 5 o'clock is going to kind of catapult me further ahead of my competition. And so that's what motivates me. The other part of it too is that I don't feel like it's work. Like, my friends want to sit down and watch Suits at night on Netflix, and I want to sit down and work on my website or work on my new pricing or something. Like, that's what I enjoy doing. So it doesn't feel like work to me. I mean, obviously sometimes it does, but 80% of the time I enjoy what I'm doing. And so I'm okay working more than 8 hours.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I mean, even in my business, I feel the same way, right? Like part work for me could be meeting someone for coffee or meeting someone for lunch or you know what I mean, and networking and things like that, right? So a lot of times it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like work. So I totally get what you mean.
Yeah.
So for people out there, whether they're young or older, any stage of life that have been thinking that maybe one day they do want to open some sort of business, what are some of the tips and advice that you would have for them?
The one, so there's a couple of quotes I love that are kind of about entrepreneurship or about life in general. One is that defines an entrepreneur as saying an entrepreneur is somebody who jumps off the cliff and builds the plane on the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been my experience to a T. Like we decided to do this before we had any idea how to run a lumberyard. Neither of us had ever run a lumberyard. We had no idea what we were about to get into, but we just committed to doing it and figured it out as we went. So that's an important one because nobody knows how to build a plane. That's the problem. Yeah. You can't build the plane first and get off the cliff because you don't know how to build the plane. Mm-hmm. The other quote I like is I guess it's a bit of a joke or whatever, but it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Yep. And so I think the source of the fear for a lot of people is that they look at where they want to be with it, right? And that is daunting as all hell. Like for me to look and be like, okay, I'm here at ground zero, and I want to be here with a big store that's doing all this revenue and it's got all this product and all these trucks and trailers and everything. It's like, how do you even start when the vision is that? But the real answer is that you just you put one foot in front of another. You just do the first thing on the list. And so I know for my wife, even she has some dreams and desires that I want to help her with too. But she's very much stuck at that stage where it's like, God, I don't know how to get to where I want to be. I don't even know where to start. And it's like, I don't think anybody does. Like Amazon started in a garage. Like nobody starts at the end.
You start at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere, and that summer might mean that you for us, that first step we took was to book a booth at the home show. Yeah. We had no business even started yet, and the first thing we did was we booked a booth at the Regina Spring Home Show because we knew if we did that, it would give us an end date. Okay. That we had to work towards. It was like, okay, well, our booth is booked, and the show starts on March 19th. It's October, so we've got 5 months to get this figured out. And so day by day, you chisel off one more thing and do one more thing, and sometimes you get caught off guard and you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming, or I didn't think about that, but you just figured out as you go. So I think the advice to anybody who wants to do their own thing is you just have to commit to starting. Okay. And one of my biggest things, like I said before, is I had this safety net at a job where I knew that if I didn't start, everything was going to be fine. It wasn't until I committed to cutting that safety net loose that I was forced to actually commit down the path of doing my own thing. Mm-hmm. So safety nets are nice. But they're not going to help you achieve your goals. So I think the biggest thing you got to do is make that first big risky move of cutting the safety net. Tell somebody you're quitting your job, tell your boss you're quitting your job as of this date, and know that you have to do something within a certain amount of time. Yeah, it's scary, but if it's too easy, if failing is too easy, if there's no repercussion to failing, then why try so hard to succeed? You know what I mean? So
that's true. That's
yeah.
True. That makes a lot of sense. I just want to thank you for everything you've shared with us today, for the tips, the tools, and sharing your journey with us. I'm sure my listeners are going to get a lot from this podcast here today. So once again, if we want to find you online, if somebody in Regina or Saskatoon is looking for a product, where do they find you? Where can they find you?
Easiest place, we just launched our new website that's full e-commerce, all of our products online, pricing's online at tuds.ca, tuds.ca. Okay. That's the easiest way to start, I think. And if you want to find me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever, we're everywhere. So just Google us.
Thank you so much for your time today. Truly appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.